And he proceeded to say, "You brought it on yourself." And then, as a professor would do, he began to explain to me the procedure and the U.S. Constitution for a constitutional amendment. He explained you have to get 2/3 of a vote in the House and Senate, you have to get 3/4 of the votes from all the legislatures in the country. And he said, I don't remember a president's name being mentioned in that particular part of the Constitution. And my advice to you is to stay out of it as long as you're a candidate. And I took his advice. Well, that was my first experience with Ted. But the conversation wasn't over. He then said, I just came from Panama, and I have a message to you from General Omar Torrijos. And he wanted me to remind you that the Christian thing to do as a president is to support a new treaty for Panama. And eventually that resulted. And I have to say, I never did blame Father Ted when it became a very unpopular thing to do, because there were 20 senators who voted for the Panama Canal treaties in 1978. 20 of them. They had to run for office again that year. Only 7 of them came back to the Senate. And the attrition rate was almost as bad in 1980, but I never blamed Father Ted for that, which I could have done. He also called me later on and said he advised me to appoint Cyrus Vance as the Secretary of State, which I did. I took his advice usually. And once when I asked him, how can you advise anybody to be a leader of a great nation, he said, be human. I took that advice as well. We remained friends from then on. And he invited me to give, as just been mentioned, the commencement address here at Notre Dame in May 1977 on human rights. And I commented then in my speech, and I quote, Father Ted Hesburgh has been the most consistent and effective spokesman for the rights of human beings that I have ever known. I nominated Father Ted as ambassador to lead the U.S. delegation to the United Nations Conference on how science and technology can be used to improve human life. And then later, I put him on the commission to create a Holocaust museum in Washington. As you can well imagine, he was one of the few Roman Catholics on the commission. There were no Baptists, by the way. And finally, as Adam Simpson has already mentioned, I made him chairman of the Select Commission on Immigration and Refugee Policy. And they made the recommendation just shortly after I left the White House. In October 2003, I was honored to join Father Hesburgh in California as we both, just the two of us, gave eulogies for Joan Kroc, who was so generous to Notre Dame and to the Carter Center and to many other causes. Well, Father Ted was in the Oval Office, and I remember in February of 1979. And he had done so much for me and for the country, many times taking on responsibilities that he didn't much want to do. And I said in a weak moment, if I could ever do anything for you, let me know. And he said, well, I noticed that yesterday you came back from a trip with Admiral Hyman Rickover on an atomic submarine on which you used to serve, and you have a great interest in the ocean, and I have a great interest in airplanes. I didn't know what was coming. And he said, I've always wanted to ride on one of the fastest airplanes in the world. And he began to teach me again, as though I didn't know, that there was a plane called the SR-71, always painted black. In fact, it was called the Blackbird. And he said, I would like to ride on the Blackbird. And I said, Father Hesburgh, it's not customary for civilians to ride on a top secret airplane. He said, that's all right. He said, I thought you looked around with cheap. So I called the Secretary of Defense, Harold Brown, and told him I had one of my few requests to him. And then I sent word to the pilot of a SR-71 that he would be having his first civilian passenger. He was a special friend of mine. And I asked him how fast the Blackbird had ever flown. He said 2,193 miles an hour. Wow. It was the fastest plane on earth. And I said, I would be very pleased if you could go a little faster than that. And on the last day of February, 1979, Father Ted went up in SR-71 Blackbird airplane, and he and the pilot went 2,200 miles an hour. He set a new world record for the fastest any human beings had ever flown, except the astronauts and a rocket. Well, we all know Father Hesburgh has an almost indescribable list of achievements in education and human rights and service to others. But in his autobiography, he gives me credit for arranging this fast ride. And he says that was one of the greatest achievements that he ever remembers. Well, I'm proud that I was able to do that for him because he did so much for people